Hi, my name is Lloyd Vogelman. I'm here with Rajiv Terwadkar and Maynard Kraak, the producer and director of The Last Victims. Firstly, I'll just introduce myself very quickly, a little bit of a background. I live in Sydney, am currently in business, but I spent probably about 20 years of my life in political activism in South Africa. Started off as president of the student union and then ended up as a regional executive member of the UDF before it got banned in 1985, spent some time in hiding and then set up the Center for the Study of Violence and Reconciliation in 1988. I'm pleased to say almost 32 years later as the founder of that center. It's still going. It set up one of the largest trauma clinics in South Africa treating victims, but by 89, 90 we were also involved in the exposure of the death squad. So amazing to spend some time with you and see this incredible movie that you have produced and directed. Let me start maybe with you, Rajiv. What was the origin of this movie? Where was the idea? How did it develop? What was the trigger?
The triggering factor is basically like, I was on the farm. I stay in North. I used to stay in Northwest. And it happened that my neighbor, one of my neighbor was Seven Squad, which I didn't know at that time. So we were talking and having lots of discussions over the weekends and all. And that triggered, like one day he was drunk quite a lot. And then he started opening up. So I was asking him a lot of questions about the history and the past and everything. How was it like during apartheid? What were your feelings? Like, do you love it? Or you regret it or whatever. So then he slowly opened up and he gave me quite a lot of information about himself. And that was the triggering factor to maybe start investigating and knowing more. So over the period of 6 months, we were just having conversation and he gave me quite a lot of information. Like this is where we used to have the cave, or this is where the road.
So this was this was a perpetrator, was it? One of the death squad members.
Yeah, one of the dates. That's right. Yeah. So he gave me initial information, and he was the one who, drove this whole thing. So I was just curious to know more and more every single time. Okay. So when I wrote the initial story, it was written as a confession, because he was kind of confessing it to me, saying that this is what I did and I feel really bad or what.
I see. Okay, great. I think I might be losing you a little. Maynard, maybe I'll just come back to you. And how did you get in? How did you get involved?
Then I think Rajiv is still busy speaking.
Oh, sorry, Rajiv, I'm losing you on the sound, so I missed that. Do you want to go back to that? Sorry.
Okay, so. Yeah, it was basically through the conversation. Like I wrote initially, basically it was the confession. That was the name of the story initially, originally.
I see.
Then it became Colonel David. So that was the second name, and it was rewritten, and we had a little bit of action. And after that, when I brought Sean Robert Daniels on board, who is Nicole Fellowship Award winner, and we both worked on the story, and then it became like a suspense thriller film inspired by true events. And then he gave me that name, like he suggested, why can't we call it The Last Victims? And I liked that name, and then we said, yes, let's go for it. So that's how it started.
Okay, fantastic. Thank you.
So the journey was over like 3 years. Yeah.
Wow.
It took this for me to get all the information.
Okay.
So yeah, that's it.
Maynard, how about you? How did you get involved, and what triggered you to do this?
So in 2016, I having just come back from spending some time in LA after doing 2 movies back to back in Cape Town. I went to Cannes that year. I go almost every year, and that particular year I went for the whole period of the of the festival, and which I don't normally do. I normally just go the first weekend and I'm out of there. But I was part of the producers network in 2016, and I stayed right through to the end. And by the end of the, by the second weekend, I was starting to have festival fatigue. And in this time during the festival, I had actually spent quite a lot of time in the at the Indian pavilion, getting to know producers from India. And this is where I met Rajiv. I met with another bloke, Swarup Kanji from Bangalore. And we all happened to be staying in Antibes, all three of us, and traveling in every day to the festival, to the market, and and then racing, trying to get the train back or the bus back, or missing both of those and having to take a cab back together, the three of us. And by the end of the festival, the second weekend, the Saturday, we had just had enough, and we none of us had actually been to Monaco before, and we decided that Saturday morning, instead of going through to Cannes, we are going to take a train to Monaco and just go and spend the day there. And that's what we did. Okay. And the one mate, Swarup, I guess there are no big casinos where he comes from. So he wanted to go and spend time in the casino. And Rajiv and myself, we weren't really bothered. And so we went and walked about, and we sat in a coffee shop there, overlooking the Mediterranean. And we started talking about the different projects, and Rajiv started telling me about this particular story. And I was so intrigued by it. And I was like, wow, this is quite amazing. Mm. But at the time he had another director in mind and so on. But I said to him, you know what, the story, there's something about it that I feel on another level that I connect with. And if at any point in time, circumstances should change, please reach out to me, because I really like to be involved. And then a number of months later, I think probably around about August, which is three or so months later, Rajiv reached out to me and said, look, would you be interested in looking at it? And this project, he's decided to go in a different direction in terms of a director, and in terms of how we produce the project. And then from there, then over the next couple of months, it was just, I just gave it a few, I didn't have to give a lot of notes, a few notes from my perspective of what maybe could be done. And of course, Sean is a fantastic writer. I don't know, maybe it broke up there when when Rajiv just mentioned that he's a Nichols Fellow, which is one of the most important screenwriting competitions in the world. Right. And he won that, I think, in 2012. I think, Rajiv, 2012.
Yeah, that's right. Yeah.
Yeah. Anyway, so by October, we had a draft which we were all warm to, and we all thought it's really good, and we can start financing the film. So that's how I came to the project.
Fantastic. Look, we've only got a few minutes, and I want to probably, if I can, just get into some of the content and some maybe of the social issues, because I think certainly as viewing it provoked quite a few things. So maybe I can just get some headline answers from both of you, and we can be as crisp as possible, just because I'd love to ask you 10 or 20 questions. I suppose one of the issues always in movies about perpetrators of violence, whether they are in South Africa or in Europe in the 30s, 40s, or different parts of any regime that is brutalized many, is how many perpetrators actually do feel a sense of guilt, of compassion about the victims or the people that they've murdered or killed or brutalized. Do you think this is a fair sample of an individual, that this one individual represents a lot, or do you think this is truly a minority of an individual who even starts to think about and has guilt?
Look, from my perspective, I think there are, especially in countries where you have this kind of traumatic events having happened. Look, we didn't technically have a civil war in South Africa. Yet we have all the scarring and all that the baggage left over from such an event in South Africa. But we have not necessarily dealt with it in a holistic way and reached everyone. So I would agree with you that if you look at the Nuremberg trials or something like this, after World War II, in terms of the Nazis, did each and every perpetrator come forward, or was every perpetrator found and tried to, to a certain extent? Probably not, and most likely not. So I would say, yeah, probably the majority of people who are the perpetrators in abusing, or abusing is not a strong enough word, torturing, murdering, killing people, most of those people would have not have come forward, yet they probably, and this is just an assumption, carrying around that that guilt, because for the most part, these people actually believed what they were doing was right. And I think that is what the point of this is. I mean, the title of this movie is The Last Victims, not Victim. It's because both are victims of the system, but not just the victim himself, but also the perpetrator.
Rajiv, a question for you. There was a small little...
I just wanted to...
Yeah, please.
Answer that quickly. From my point of view, there were, like, I have spoken to like 3-4 Sivan squads with that background. And 3 of them, they have been doing quite a lot of good work, because they obviously cannot go to like TRC and say that this is what we have done. What they are doing in reality in today's world is basically they are going and helping the black individuals or the previously disadvantaged individuals by either training in different sectors or whatever. So it's basically their payback, either in a different way. So I think there are people who are thinking that yes, what we did it for the nation at that time, and that was mandatory and that was required. So whether they were forced to do it or whatever, that's a different question. Obviously they were forced to do it. But yeah, so coming back to that, the main point, yes, there's quite a few of them, like the people which I spoke to, 3 of them, they felt really bad and they are doing something for the community.
Oh, that's wonderful to hear. I suppose I sit always hearing the voice of those people who've reflected on their lives and have changed and are doing good. And then I sort of have the statistic in the back of my mind, as Maynard said, is that most perpetrators get away with it, whether it's in Iraq or South America or Chile or South Africa. And I assume that a lot of the death squad members and security police, have ended up doing very well, as your movie demonstrates, financially. They end up as global security consultants. They have a competency in part, which is evil and security. And they do pretty well, I assume. And I assume some of them have been employed by the ANC in governmental jobs. I would assume that as well. Did you speak to any of the victims? Yes. Maynard, maybe I'll push this back to you. What was your experience, or any of your view of the victims of those who have suffered from the death squads, and how they felt about the Truth and Reconciliation Commission allowing reprieves of these individuals who had literally killed their family members or friends?
So just as a, in brackets, my previous statement was to do with the perpetrator. The mirror to that is the victims. How many of the victims actually have been able to get closure? Because not everyone has come forward to say, well, I've done X and I've done Y. And so I think on both sides of this divide, we have people that are, that have not been able to really deal with their past and get the closure. So how successful were we with this, say, with the TRC? And once again, this is just my opinion. I would say it was successful for those people who had the opportunity to confront the perpetrators of violence towards them or their family members. However, probably the majority of people who are victims or have family who are victims of these death squads have not. So this is the fine balance that you have. In terms of your question, having spoken to to victims of the C1. Rajiv has more experience specifically to do with people that had been victims of C1. I'm from Cape Town, and a lot of and I grew up in. I'm 50 this year. I grew up in the 80s, 85. This Trojan horse incident happened. Literally a kilometer away from my house. These kind of things. So of course I have friends and family who were UDF members mostly, not necessarily ANC members, but UDF members, who were subjected to detentions and so forth. From that perspective, I have probably a bit of a more unique perspective, because I myself, after university, went to the military, which is not something which is expected of someone who comes from a very middle class, English colored community in Cape Town. That is, you become a lawyer or you become a doctor or, or so on. Yeah. I went and I was in the Navy. Wow. I followed that up by being a detective in the police services.
Wow.
And in work, and by the way, nothing to do with politics, I was working in a gang-ridden, hectic part of Cape Town, something I had not experienced or seen in my private school education. I've not had that experience, so that was something completely new, eye-opening to me. But what I could identify within the story, in terms of from the perspective of the perpetrator here, was the trauma of actually seeing death on a daily basis. It may not have been me killing anyone, but seeing the death. That is something which believe me, I mean, in making this film, 20 odd years after, 25 years after having been, or 24 years after being in the police service as a detective, it brought all of those emotions back to the surface, which I obviously had not dealt with myself, and through the making of this film, it was actually quite a cathartic experience. I mean, I was so emotional, you cannot believe it. I mean, Rajiv can tell you. I mean, there was a couple of days I was I was in tears. You know what I mean? It just became too much quite often, and so I could identify with those kind of things, and I can just imagine the victims, how they must feel, or their families must have felt, and as I said, the majority of whom would not have got that closure as those who did have the opportunity to confront.
Thank you. There was something interesting that I probably always just have never reflected on coming out of the movie, which was you sort of got perpetrators of violence and you've got victims of violence. And then you've sort of got this channel, of the informer who is a collaborator, but is actively part of the perpetrators. And I've never really, until I saw this movie, I've never really thought about what has happened to all of those informers. What's their psychological process? Most of them probably never went to the Truth and Reconciliation Commission because that wasn't its purpose. And I just found that it was a real gap in my thinking, the way you exposed that. I'd love to hear maybe Rajiv very, very quickly, because we're running out of time. Just maybe comment on the informers and what has happened to these people, if you know anything. What's your view on what their experience is of post-apartheid South Africa and reconciliation?
To tell you the honest and brutal truth, some of them are still staying in KZN, KwaZulu-Natal. I have a few people's names and details. I met one, but he now claims to be like, the apartheid activists.
Sure.
So they take the benefit from the government.
Yes.
And then they say, no, we are the freedom fighters. But when I met all these other freedom fighters who were part of the actual MK, Kontobe Sizwe and all, so they say, no, these guys are really the crooks. They are the ones who were the informants. And now after 1994, these guys are coming back and saying that, no, we are the ones, we fought for the nation. But that's not the truth. So that's there are people who are still surviving, staying in KwaZulu-Natal that I know of.
Okay. I've probably only got
quite an interesting thing.
Yeah, that is fascinating. I mean, it's just an area, as you say, Rajiv, I just hadn't considered at all. It was a complete omission. We probably only got time for two more questions.
Yeah.
Maynard, I just have to ask you briefly, because you touched on it, is if you can, just give me 2 or 3 lines about how the hell did you move from a detective or in the Navy to a filmmaker? Can you give us the headlines for that?
Lloyd, you're asking a very difficult question to answer in 2 or 3 lines.
Well,
It's a very complicated answer. It's a very complicated answer. I already, part of that I already put out there. You know that I come from a very middle class English colored community in Cape Town, and the expectation is not to go to the military or to the police services. Absolutely, However, when I was a kid, I was absolutely captivated and enchanted by the movies, by cinema. Specifically, my father refused to purchase a video recorder, a VCR. So my experience of film has always been through film. My dad was a teacher for 40 odd years. He taught in District 6 for 30 of those years, and he, before I started school, he used to bring a projector, 16mm projector home on a Friday from school, the school projector, and whatever movies they had show that day, whether it be some, The Good, the Bad, and the Ugly, or whatever it was, we would watch that on, in the living room.
So that's
where it started.
Okay.
And I grew up very, luckily for myself, during its apartheid period, within walking distance of a single screen cinema in an Indian area adjacent to the area I grew up in the Sydney 400 in Rylands. And from the age of, I think, 11, when I went to watch a film, which I certainly should not have been watching, but my friend's dad, my best friend, Robin Roberts, his dad took us to go watch this film, Uncle Derek. He went to watch a Charles Bronson movie, Death Hunt, which we certainly should not have been watching. However, the lights went out, this huge cinema, that time the curtains opened, the screen, and I was just, this is magical. I transported into a new world. When I was in the police services, after spending a couple of years working in, I was at the Steenberg Detective Branch, so Lavender Hill, Steenberg Retreat. If you know Cape Town, you will know these are some of the most dangerous places in the world. In fact, Lavender Hill at the time had a nickname, and I think it still has that nickname, Kill Me Quick Town. And dealing with these gangsters and dead bodies almost every day, it was quite hectic. I kind of took stock of my life. So this is great. I had this opportunity to see something which I've never experienced in my life before. But is this something which I want to continue with the rest of my life? Probably not, and what is it that I'm really, what I really want to do? And I thought, I transported back to that magical moment I felt in the cinema for the first time watching a film. And I thought, actually, I think I want to become an actor. That's what I want to do. And I returned to university, went back to UCT to study drama. And I ended up directing all the time because I was older, had more experience than the kids coming straight out of school. So everyone kind of graduated, leaned towards myself and my friend at the time, Monwa BC James. Quite interesting. I came from this military and police background, and he came from Upla, and we became these really good mates. This is in 1995, post democracy. And we were the two older guys in the group, and we tended to be directing more. And that's when I discovered actually I really would like to pursue this particular craft. Yeah. So I know I tried to praise that as quickly as small as possible. Yeah, but
it wasn't the 3 lines I was looking for, but thank you. I know we're short on time, so I'm going to start to close off. I just wanted to also say I thought the performances were just phenomenal in it. And I mean, these movies can end up for me a lot of the time like a lot of cliches and very sort of one-dimensional. And I just love the fact that both of you have produced such a nuanced, sophisticated account of people's lives. So thank you. It does remind me, though, I had sort of two big takeaways. The one was a book that influenced me substantively, and I don't know why I brought it up, but I don't know if you've read the Hannah Arendt's book called The Banality of Evil, which is just about Adolf Eichmann, actually, and about his ordinariness. It was a very controversial book, partly because it just showed how evil can be ordinary. It doesn't have to be a big thing. It's not a big event. If you're doing it every day, it's like brushing your teeth, right? That's what you do. You take the train, you put people in it, you take them out, you gas them, you move on to the next thing. It's a task. And I thought what your movie did so brilliantly was really, it showed that, you know, the beating up of the character on the side streets is just part and parcel of what they do. They then chat about their lives. I have worked with offenders. I worked with some of the Elman Nofumela. It really represented that so brilliantly. And I think the anger and the rage of the victims. So I just wanted to say, from my point of view personally, thank you. You've done a wonderful job. I wish you the best of luck, both of you, with your movie. And I hope it is extremely successful. So Rajiv and Maynard, thank you so much.
Thank you, Lloyd.
Thank you so much. Thanks a lot, Lloyd.